The 540 is brought to you by StarCityGames.com's weekly sale. Head over to StarCityGames.com/sale and get in on the land grab this week. From now until Sunday, December 12th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, you can save 15% on all Magic the Gathering and non-basic lands. Whether we're talking about the original dual lands, maybe you need the newest cycle from Innistrad, Midnight Hunt, and Crimson Vow for your cube, fetch lands, shock lands, really anything in between for any reason. Even if you're into snarls, I'm not here to judge. They're 15% off. They're still non-basic lands. Whatever your non-basic land needs, time to buy them is now, and the place is at StarCityGames.com/sale.
What's up, everybody? Cedric Phillips here, stopping by real quick to let you know about one of Star City Games' newest podcasts, The Receivables, hosted by yours truly, alongside my partner in crime, of course, Patrick Sullivan, where the two of us discuss Magic sets, both past and present, from top to bottom. On every episode of The Receivables, you're going to hear us talk about the facts of a set, the mechanics of a set, the cycles of a set, the boring stuff, before we get into some crazy stories of when we were playing Magic during the times that the set was legal. We've got a ridiculous award show where we give out awards like the Char Rumbler Award for weirdest card in a set, the Oko Thief of Crowns Award for best card in the set, and a whole bunch more, before we finally decide, hey, what card won the set and what letter grade should we give the set? It's a whole lot of fun. We're having a blast recording them. Hopefully you have the opportunity to listen to it and you enjoy it as much as we're enjoying recording them. Where can you find it? StarCityGames.com or wherever else you listen to your podcast. The Receivables every single week here at SCG.
The 540 is also brought to you by Coalesce Apparel and Design. Head over to coalesceapparel.shop and use gift code SCG at checkout to save 10% off your entire order. If you want to rep the coolest Magic the Gathering themed hoodies and t-shirts or stickers, head over to coalesceapparel.shop. Maybe you want to rep our fallen friend Golos with the Tireless Pilgrim versus the Multiverse shirt, or maybe you're Wooburg Forever and you want to go with the South Beach collection. Any way you want to do it. Anti-Mulligan Club, we got you. MTG Jam, of course. And all of the Keeping It 100 line, there for you, coalesceapparel.shop. Use gift code SCG at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Nobody made what they wanted, so they made it themselves.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the 540, your favorite cube podcast, hosted by StarCityGames.com. I am Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. And once again, I'll be joined this week by Ryan Saxe. How are you, Ryan?
Hey, I'm good. I'm Ryan Saxe, and you can find me at RC Saxe on Twitter.
And this week, we're going to be having a pretty interesting topic here, something a little off the beaten path. I know that often when we talk about cubes and what people know about cube and the most generalized experience, it tends to be people have definitely drafted, specifically the Magic Online vintage cube, more than really any other cube that's ever existed. Just widest audience, is up pretty often, easy to access. But this week, we're actually going to be talking about cards that you just can't draft on Magic Online. For a myriad of reasons, we're going to be going over cards that are, whatever reason, silver bordered, conspiracy, mystery booster playtest cards. I want to call it fake cards, but they're real cards. They're just not really appropriate for Magic Online. They're cards that generally aren't going to be tournament legal or don't really function in sanctioned settings. But yeah, this is our fake card episode. This is kind of in honor of the upcoming Unfinity set, which there have been some reveals for that set. Last week, we learned that this will not be a silver bordered unset. So this is actually the fourth unset, starting with Unglued back in, I think, 1997. And then many years later, I think a full decade before Unhinged, then Unstable, now Unfinity. Those previous three sets, they were all silver bordered. So explicitly, by looking at them, you could tell this is a silver border. It's not legal for tournament Magic. Unfinity is doing things a little bit different. There's going to be a black bordered set. Many of the cards will be legal in tournaments, except they're going to do this acorn stamp thing. So some of them will not. But I'm excited about the cards that won't be tournament legal generally more than the ones that will. I actually was really jazzed about Unhinged when it came out. Part of that is just how old I was at the time. I think I was 16, 15 years old. So the goofy cards were really fun for me. And of course, the full art basic lands were a big part of the draw there. Did you ever get into the unsets, Ryan?
So I've played with some of the uncards, like the older uncards when I was like 10. But they were like in like actual decks because I was 10. It wasn't like half the cards I played, I wasn't playing right anyways. And some of my favorite things are everybody that I played with. This was way before Dark Depths was like a thing that you could actually do. Like the only way in Magic's history at this time to use it was sink 30 mana into it. And Dark Depths was like everybody played Dark Depths. Well, first off, it was a land, so we all assumed we could tap it for mana. Like, why wouldn't we be able to tap it for mana? So it tapped for mana.
Sure, right.
But I can probably say I have like fairly put 30 mana into Dark Depths more than maybe anybody in the world. But
I will say that the implied Urborg just tapping it for mana is a little unfair. But that aside, I imagine you've thawed the most.
A little bit, but it's like a one of in everybody's 100 card singleton decks that are like bad. Anyways, those decks, plenty of them ended up having uncards, so I played with it there. The first time I actually like really played with a bunch of uncards together was neither Unglued or Unhinged. It was Unstable. I drafted it a few times. One of the things that I really like about the sets is they're just fun, right? Like you get together with a bunch of friends and you have a good time. There are good stories. I remember somebody drafting like a squirrel deck. There was like, I think there was a common that's like a 1-mana 1/1 that if you ask somebody around if they like squirrels and they say yes, it comes with like a squirrel token. This person drafted like 6 of them. And for some reason, basically everybody that was drafting didn't like squirrels. and so they would go around and ask, and turns out I liked squirrels, but I was one of the last people that they asked, and everybody else didn't like squirrels, so they just kept not getting the 1/1s. So it's fun. It leads to fun stories, and I've certainly played with a bunch of them in Cube too.
Yeah, we ran the Unstable pre-release at Lodestone, and I remember there was one or maybe a couple cards where you asked another person for a high five, and I think there were outcomes based off of getting it or not getting the high five, which that led to some nonsense.
Some feel bads too, maybe.
Yeah, but the card that I played with, like in my casual garbage decks when I was in high school, I have played an embarrassing amount of the card Mana Screw, which is fiddly and takes forever to do anything with. It's a 1-mana artifact, and you can pay 1 mana to flip a coin. And if you win the flip, you make 2 mana. And if you lose the flip, nothing happens.
So you can just twiddle your thumbs if you want. And maybe if you twiddle them long enough, you get to do something great. But most of the time,
you flip a bunch of coins and like generally you run out of mana because you just keep pushing it. But sometimes you can do something spectacular in theory. I don't know. But yeah, flipped a bunch of coins and it was my turn.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed reading a number of the cards. Some of them have like really base level kind of bathroom humor, but they got a lot better about that. I think Unstable was pretty differently set up, and Unfinity looks like it is classier styles of humor.
Yeah.
So I am kind of excited. We've already seen a few cards from there. They look pretty cool. And yeah, the theme this week, I'm calling it non-sanctioned cards for Cube. We're talking about all these sorts of things that you will not see on Magic Online. It's not just unsets. It makes sense to me to also rope in stuff from like Conspiracy, some promotional cards that you won't see on Magic Online that are not tournament legal, that sort of thing. What we're going to do here, we are going to take a break and then we'll tell you exactly what all these categories are, what all these things are that you haven't seen on the digital cubes that maybe you could try in your own paper cube. Maybe you have some of this stuff in your paper cube already. So we're going to go over what those are and then ultimately reveal our top 8 list for the ones of these that we think are the most fun inclusions for Cube. So we're going to take a quick break and be right back to tell you all about all of these unsanctioned Cube cards.
Look, we're all Magic players here, so I know you're probably like me. And you have some extra cards that are hanging around that you would love to sell for cash or maybe trade in for some more cards. Well, if you're looking to sell or trade your Magic the Gathering cards, it has literally never been easier. Visit starcitygames.com/sell with a 30% store credit trade-in bonus and the fastest turnaround time in the industry. There is no reason to sell to anybody else. We have 4 convenient ways to sell your cards to us. 1, check out our buy list. You can find out exactly what we're paying for each of your cards individually right now. That too much work? Number 2, check out our ship and sell program. Put your cards in a box, tape it up, send it to us. We'll do the rest of the work. Or if you're passing through Roanoke, Virginia, come visit Star City Comics and Games, and we can sit down with a buyer and work out a trade right there in the store. Or if you might be a store and you're looking to offload bulk and you have over 500,000 cards you're looking to sell, we can come to you. Any of the ways that you want to work with us, go to starcitygames.com/sell. That's SELL right now for more information.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time to get into a little bit more detail about the categories of non-sanctioned cards for cube consideration we're going to be talking about this week. Top of the show, we talked about unsets. That's our first category. Once again, that's going to be those 4 sets: Unglued, Unhinged, Unstable, the upcoming Unfinity. We mentioned a few cards at the top of the show from these sets, but this is, of course, 4 whole sets of Magic the Gathering. So there's kind of a lot of cards. And what's interesting about this, Mark Rosewater actually released an article regarding the upcoming Unfinity set, and he did kind of a breakdown. And part of the reason that set's going to be black bordered and many of the cards will be tournament legal, if you just go through the file for all these unsets, a lot of them really could just be black bordered. And the reason they're a silver border is maybe it's like a silly creature type, some kind of pun in the name, that sort of thing. But mechanically, they're not really out of bounds. And so those cards are going to be tournament legal this time around, though the most fun ones tend to be the ones that are just out there a little bit more wacky. I'm actually a big fan. Do you know the card Chaos Confetti, Ryan?
Chaos Confetti. It sounds like it would be like a chaos orb that you rip up.
That's exactly what it is.
Right.
And you sprinkle the confetti, all the ripped up pieces of the Chaos Confetti on the battlefield, and anything that they touch gets destroyed.
That sounds unbelievably strong.
Yeah, it is incredibly strong. There's also a card from Unglued called Blacker Lotus. It's a black lotus, but you rip it up and it makes 4 mana. But you have to rip it up to get the mana.
One of my better cube memories, I was at a GP and I played a powered cube that had a Blacker Lotus. And I asked the person, I was like, so do I actually rip this up? And they were like, yeah, I have a bunch of them. I replace it every time. You get to use it once. And it was super fun to like try and figure out like when to, I remember I had like a point where I chose not to because I thought I would win the game probably anyways, rather than like use my Black Lotus to cement my win because I wanted to like save my Blacker Lotus. And I actually had I actually don't know where it is now, but I used to keep the ripped up pieces of the Blacker Lotus on my desk.
Nice. I kind of wonder about that because I know that there are quite a lot of cubes, or at least a few that I've personally encountered, which leads me to believe that there are a good amount more, where people do that exact thing. They have their collection of Blacker Lotus, and over time they get ripped up. I wonder how many copies of that card still exist. Certainly relative to other unglued rares, it's got to be the smallest number.
It's actually, it's really interesting. Usually, like when we think about, for example, the reserve list and the relationship between supply and demand and how we know the supply never changes. It's a funny subset of cards like Blacker Lotus, which probably will never be printed again, but supply is actually by definition going down over time.
Right. It's not just the occasional trip through the washing machine. These ones are being deliberately destroyed.
Yeah.
Another unglued card I really like is Ashnod's Coupon. Do you know that one?
Is this one where you like somebody has to get you a drink?
Yep. Yeah. 0 mana artifact. You sacrifice it. Target player gets you target drink. And you have to pay the cost for the drink.
It's a fun one. I mean, it's nice that they get to mess around and have make things that otherwise like you really don't get to make. And sometimes that means something like Ashnod's Coupon that's ridiculous. And, you know, other times it's something that just, you know, maybe it doesn't work within the rules. We'll get into, I guess this is a good example for this. We'll talk about them later. Some of the mystery booster playtest cards, they're like, they make sense. You can read them and intuit them as a person, but they actually just don't work within the rules of Magic. I think Slivdrazi Monstrosity is one of them, which is it costs Wooburg and also a colorless, like a waste. It's not a generic, if I'm remembering correctly. It's like an 8. I think it says, you know, slivers have devoid, or something like that. And basically, based on the way that like color changes work, it can't itself be devoid. Something along that lines.
Is it just like the way layers work or something?
Yeah, exactly. I don't remember the specifics.
I definitely like read that card, and my assumption was it's like this fake mystery booster card just because how goofy it is to be like the Sliver Eldrazi.
Right.
I did not actually know that it had a rules issue for existing in the game.
Yeah, so if you have I think the Gather like legality and like, you know, they have notes about the cards. It's like, you know, based on, you know, whatever rules, this doesn't actually work, but treat it like it does. I only know this because I know someone with a devoid cube that has Slivdrazi Monstrosity as technically the only non-devoid card, but for all intents and purposes, it's devoid.
Nice. Yeah, so we are going to have a couple unhinged, glued, stable, maybe an Infinity card in our top 8 list, but are there any other uncards that you really like for a cube?
So I think it kind of depends on it. For me, if you're going to include uncards and cards like this, I think it's all about like, okay, this is this fun new, they change the game in interesting ways, and it almost depends on the cube. For example, the card Topsy Turvy is an uncard. It's a 3-mana enchantment, 2 and a blue, and it says that effectively turns happen in reverse order, right? You go end step to second main to combat to first main to whatever it is, upkeep, whatever, to your beginning step. And then that beginning step happens. So you would untap, draw, and then have your upkeep or whatever the order that happens in. And that's actually, I think, a fantastic uncard, I would call it a powered uncard. I think it's probably too good in most unpowered cubes. Just because when you read it, you don't necessarily realize this, but it's almost a time walk variant in the sense that like you play it and then your turn goes backwards. So one, you'll get another combat step if that matters, but you'll get to untap all your mana and draw a card, and your opponent doesn't get to untap their mana and draw a card until they're effectively what would be their end step, right? So that's like a really powerful one. I wouldn't say, that it's the most fun, but if Time Walk is in your cube, then, Topsy Turvy too. An uncard that I love actually is More or Less, which is a blue mana for an instant that lets you just sort of like change a number on a card, up 1 or down 1. So, you can target a Planeswalker and get to the ultimate earlier because you can, make it the -7 on some Planeswalker or -6. And I just think that card has like a lot of like fun and almost cute little puzzles.
Yeah, there's a lot of just really fun cards that you can put in cube. You can go all the way. You could have a fully silver bordered cube. There's definitely enough cards. And there's some themes. I know that Unglued had a big die rolling theme, and then Unhinged had a little bit more coin flipping going on. And then there's other things. Chicken Tribal, I believe, part of Unglued. And then there's also just a few ones that can just pop up in a regular cube. We have kind of most of the most played and ones people would be more familiar with on our top 8 list. But there are just kind of a lot. If you never got down the well and just looked at the cards from the Unsets, there's some really cool ones. And in my group, we talk about the idea of playing with them more than we actually play with them. But there are some really nice ones, and I'm usually kind of happy to see one in a cube. But then the next category for these non-sanctioned cards is going to be conspiracy sets. Conspiracy and Conspiracy Take the Crown, which introduced, believe it or not, the card type Conspiracy. And then there's a lot of other cards that care about your draft pool, things that you reveal when you draft them. You note things during the draft. They reference your draft. And then conspiracies are these card type that if they're in your pool, you reveal them at the beginning of the game and they have some effect. And these ones are like explicitly banned in Legacy. They're not like a silver bordered clause. These are black bordered cards, but some of them are actually kind of absurdly powerful.
Oh, yeah. Conspiracies, like, I would say the best set of conspiracies are probably the best card in any cube you put them in. I don't like, no matter what, like that includes cubes with Black Lotus and Soul Ring.
Yeah, and there's like the draft stuff, and there are some cards from this set that show up on Magic Online. Kind of one of the most powerful white cards for Cube. The Monarch mechanic was introduced in Conspiracy, and Palace Jailer is a really powerful white card. That one does show up on Magic Online, but then kind of these weirder ones. Give us an example of some of the more powerful conspiracies.
The two that really come to mind, I'm forgetting the name of one. So one would be Power Play, which is just you're always on the play. I think, generally speaking, when you win the die roll, right, you choose to play. And it might seem like a small thing, like, oh, well, like you would be on the play 2 out of 3 times, technically, if you won the die roll anyways, and you're on the play 50%. So this pick is irrelevant 50% of the time. And it's like, so are most of the cards that you pick in a draft because you don't draw them or they end up in your sideboard. This is a pick that 100%, like it guarantees for your entire draft, all 9 games, if it gets to those 9 games, you are on the play. So that's very powerful. Another one, what's it called? It's the one that you get to basically draw 2 7-card hands.
Yeah, I don't know the name either, but yeah, you look at 2 7-card hands from your deck and you shuffle one back in and the other one is the hand you play with. You can always that's just an addition and then you can still mulligan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's so busted. It's just a free serum powder that you always have.
Yep. Yeah. So some of those are pretty wild and so are some of the cards in the set too. But other ones, are a little bit more tame. I think the way that I think about it is there's almost 2 different types of conspiracies, right? There's the ones that give you something that, no one else would have access to, right? Like this power play kind of card. Then there are other conspiracies that are targeted at, let's say, a specific card. I think Mizio's something. I don't know the name. There are just so many of these cards is, at the beginning of the game, you can make a note of a card name of a creature. And when you cast that creature, you can reveal this conspiracy. And this conspiracy says creatures of that name enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. The card's actually really powerful, right? Like if you have a Kitchen Finks in your deck, that Kitchen Finks now cannot die because it has persist, but always comes back with a +1/+1 counter. So it can do some really, really messed up things. But at the same point, it's only modifying 1 card in your deck that you still have to draw like normal Magic. It's almost like, having a conspiracy that's not like that, right? Like something like Power Play is like having a companion.
Yeah, really, really similar to companions there and can feel comparably busted. Sometimes even more busted, if you can believe that. And I know that a number of people actually build cubes. This is one of the more popular ones that I have seen where people build a cube to emulate the retail draft experience. And you see breaking of the multiple rule, partly so you can draft multiples of the conspiracies. And you get copies like the card where you put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. And then if you have multiples of the creatures, then is a bigger deal. The thing you mentioned with Kitchen Finks, that would be more for a more traditional cube that just kind of has a conspiracy. If you're trying to support persist combo, that's a great tool for that. And then there's also ways to really lean into conspiracy, try to make it feel like a conspiracy draft. So there's always conspiracies being revealed. I've played these cubes a little bit. They are very not for me because they get so different from playing Magic. Like you actually change the functionality of the cards, which I get less engaged because I like Magic. So I don't have much of a need to really change the game in such a fundamental way.
It's almost like when I drafted the actual set Conspiracy, I kind of felt the same way, where I drafted it quite a few times, and it was almost like a break from Magic. It was just so different and interesting. But yeah, I mean, for me, again, that's not the experience that I would want from my personal cube. That's more about being Magic to me. But it is really fun, and these as we're calling them, fake cards or unsanctioned cards, whatever you want, that they can tell some really unique and interesting stories, and you get to do things that you wouldn't otherwise do in Magic. Related to the example that you just gave about Conspiracy, before we move on, I want to tell a story from when I first drafted Conspiracy. Because this was pretty incredible. I was playing at the Uncommons in New York City, and I was playing with a friend, Jeff, who was in my pod. Jeff also, I believe, at the time was one of the owners of Uncommons, and drafted a deck with 1 million of the same 1-drop. Okay, and actually, this was one of the first times I saw like a true galaxy brain moment of someone doing something that they could only ever do here. And I was so impressed that they thought of it on the fly. They had 3 Conspiracies naming this 1-drop. Okay. They drafted 8 cards of like a red 1-mana 1/1. 8 copies. Which sounds, it had like multi-kicker or something like Skittered Lizard.
Okay, sure.
And I just looked up the Conspiracies because I wanted to get their names this time. The 3 Conspiracies they named on it were Immediate Action, which was creatures you control with the chosen name have haste. Secrets of Paradise, which is creatures you control with the chosen name can tap to add 1 mana of any color to their mana pool. And Summoner's Bond, when you cast a creature with one of the chosen names, you can search your library for a creature card with... did they cheat? Maybe they drafted 2 Summoner's Bonds. I'm trying to think about basically what I saw happen. This is so funny now. What I saw happen was them basically every single game they started the game with 8 1/1s on the battlefield that were all Birds of Paradises, because when they cast one, they tutored for the next. It entered the battlefield with haste and could tap for a mana to cast the next.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind was blown. But now I'm reading the like small text on this card, and I think it says 2 different cards. Anyways, okay. That story is
makes a pretty big difference.
Less exciting. It seems like they thought of that, I guess, when they did that.
Yeah, you have to get 4 of 2 different 1-drops.
Right.
And then also double up on the other Conspiracies.
Yes.
And then there's a number of other cards. We'll be coming back to some of these draft referencing cards, but I want to talk about some of the ones. Actually, I want to talk about a card that I don't like.
Sure.
But just as an example of the mechanic, there's a card from Conspiracy, Take the Crown, called Arcane Savant. It's 3 blue for a 3/3 human wizard. And before you shuffle your deck to start the game, you may reveal a card from your deck and exile. You reveal the Arcane Savant from your deck, and then you exile an instant or sorcery you drafted that isn't in your deck. So just some card in your sideboard is now linked with your Arcane Savant. And when the Arcane Savant enters the battlefield, you can copy and cast a copy of that instant or sorcery. When this card was previewed, I was thinking about this card for Grixis Cube, because the idea is there's a few kind of bonkers cards you can tack onto this. Time Spiral, Cruel Ultimatum are the 2 that come to mind. And the experience of those just being stapled onto a 5-mana 3/3 actually sounded kind of sour to me. Like, if you're just interested in like doing the most powerful thing, this is a very powerful direction to take having these cards in your cube. But it's one of those things similar to just the Conspiracy cube draft or the Conspiracy retail environment, where it really doesn't feel like Magic. Like, that shows up and it's not evocative of anything that I'm familiar with. A big part of cube for me is nostalgia. It's cool to me to see somebody cast Cruel Ultimatum for 7 mana. It's not very cool to me to see this fake card show up and do this nonsense thing. But I'm sure that other people like it a lot more than I do.
Yeah, I really so I had Arcane Savant in my cube for a while, and I really enjoyed it until it was sort of the same thing. Although what made me remove it from my cube was it on upheaval.
Oh,
because it bounces itself.
Yeah, so you just keep going. Mercy.
Yeah, so upheaval costs one less with buyback 0. And it's not.
Yeah, that's not okay.
It just doesn't. Sometimes it just. There was a game that basically just like went forever, and it became like it was literally impossible to even if they couldn't put together the win. It wasn't possible to beat them either.
Right. You just had to keep resetting, and then presumably somebody ran out of cards or had a mechanism to stop that eventually. It was how the game would be decided.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I saw some like really cool things with like one of the things that I really enjoyed is, having it like on like a living death was like super powerful. Like being able to like someone like reanimated their own living death was like really cool, and it brought up some cool stories, but it also does plenty of things that are just like not okay.
And that's kind of the general note I have about looking into the conspiracy sets. There's some stuff that is genuinely exciting, and I don't want to yuck anybody's yum if you're into this experience. But these sets do have incredibly powerful and, in fact, broken stuff if you get too far into it. All right, next up, we have Mystery Booster Playtest cards. I adore these cards. I actually was at the inaugural Mystery Booster sealed deck event in Richmond. I was there for the Mythic Championship that weekend. And going into it, nobody knew what was going to be in Mystery Boosters, like at all. Like not even the fact that it was a set of 1,000 some reprints. And we certainly didn't know about the playtest cards. And this was the only experience I've had since I was first introduced to the game, where I was like opening up a pack of Magic cards and I didn't know what was going to happen. Like, I felt like I was 15 years younger. Like I was a kid opening my first booster pack. Like this was a very special experience for me. And just like seeing these cards that are just these wonky playtest cards that I love the way they template them. If they reference themselves, they say card name, which is how playtest cards look. If you ever seen the files on the playtest cards they use at Wizards of the Coast. And then there's like in the booster packs, and we got to play with them then. And I've put a few of these into my cube over time, a few of my different cubes. And there's these cards that you mentioned, the Sliv Drazi technically is breaking the rules, and some of them are breaking the rules. Some of them are making new rules. Some of them just do work, but are doing kind of wacky things. And there's a lot of really cool designs in the playtest card file.
Yeah, and also, I mean, some of them are actually, like, at the time they were doing wonky things that we didn't do in Magic that now are, like, actually on cards. When I was going through cards to prepare for this episode, I found a playtest card that literally had the cleave mechanic on it.
Yeah, and there's also, like, I think Enchantment Ties has been printed into an actual Magic card.
Yeah, like some of them are like, do you remember that whole, I think it was Great Designer Search with the green-black Sarah Angel?
Yes.
That's a playtest card. There's literally, 3 green-black for a 4/4 flying vigilance as a playtest card.
Yeah, a bunch of referential stuff in there, which is super fun for me.
And some of those cards, they're actually just like pretty great for cube. Nothing that like necessarily stands out as like if you're going to introduce this something fun and novel. But, some of my favorite cards actually, like I know for a fact there are quite a few playtest cards that if they were, black border printed into a set, most of my cubes would even, try them out. The best example of that is probably Frogkin Kidnapper, which is 1 and a black for a 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, it does the thing that Paulo's World Championship card does, where they reveal their hand and like one card in that hand now costs more to cast. Mm-hmm. And I love that card, and I think there are a lot of other cards that are completely playing like kind of within the rules of Magic, but are a little bit different than what we've seen before. And I thought it was really cool and exciting to go through and see all of them.
Definitely. And there's a range. Some of them can be pretty powerful effects. Many of them are just really fun cards. And for various reasons, they won't or haven't made it into Black Border Magic. Unicycle is one that we agree is very cool. It's this equipment / vehicle, where it's either a 3/1. It has some keywords. I don't remember what they are.
First strike haste.
First strike haste sounds right. Yeah, either you can give +3/+1 first strike and haste, or you crew the vehicle and it's a 3/1 with first strike and haste, which is pretty funny. I'm also very partial to Form of the Mole Drifter, which is 4 and a blue for an enchantment, and just creatures you control enter the battlefield as Mole Drifters. two flyers that draw 2 cards. But definitely going to see some of these mystery booster cards in our top 8. And I hope that we see more releases like that in the future. Though I guess that Unfinity is going to be of a similar vein anyway. But
yeah, actually,
we'll see.
One of the things that I'm really excited about for Unfinity is from the cards that we've seen, and we kind of noted this at the beginning of this episode, it feels just like a little more real to me. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it. Again, you've said this before, I'll say it again. I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum. But for me personally, there's something about playing with a card that doesn't feel like a Magic card to me, that doesn't, makes me not want to put the card in my queue. I've even had that experience. I tried setting all of my basics as snow basics, and even that, it felt a little odd to me. I know, like.
No, actually, I love that example. I am very much of the same mind. I actually have a box of basics for a cube where I have half just basics there, and I have a pile of snow basics as well, because the rule is officially they count as snow lands, but if it matters to me, I'm going to play with the snow ones.
Right. And the fact that they're not actually silver bordered, and also like the design, at least it seems more like maybe you couldn't actually print this in a black bordered set for plenty of reasons, but like maybe it still actually kind of works within the rules of Magic. And I'm really excited. I think a lot of the playtest cards were like this. Plenty of the promo cards are like this. And, a lot of the new uncards are like this. Maybe we'll move to a place where I'm more into messing around and playing with these cards.
Definitely. The next category is there's a few different promotional cards that have been given away or sold for a few different reasons, where some of these are silver bordered. In general, these are cards that are not going to be tournament legal, released in various ways. There's going to be the holiday gift promos. These are given out to a list that I think gets a little bit longer every year. I know that we get a copy of the holiday promo at Lodestone, one for the store. And then Wizards employees, I think a number of creators are sent these as well. I want to say Fruitcake Elemental was the first of the holiday promos. So they're like holiday themed. They released them towards the end of the year. And they've been doing those for, it's got to be at least 10 years now. There's a bunch of different holiday promos. Heroes of the Realm is one they do internally at Wizards of the Coast. People that work on various sets or do certain work in-house, they are awarded these promos, which these are like one of the smallest print runs of any Magic card that exists. They actually have a unique back. They have a back that designates Heroes of the Realm, so they don't have the same Magic the Gathering back, which is rare for anything that's produced. And those ones are varying degrees of actually playable. I haven't read all of them just because I know I'll never own one, and I don't want to get in my head that I want one. but there are some. We'll talk about at least one of those cards in a minute here. And then another one that comes to mind, the HasCon promos. This was one where a number of Hasbro, this is, I think, the first, at least one of the very first forms of a Magic card that reference other IP. You have some Hasbro lines that are released on these cards, Sword of Dungeons and Dragons. One of those, there's a Nerf War card. You use a Nerf gun and you shoot it at your opponent's deck. And there's a Grimlock, a Transformers. I did My Little Pony as well. So those are all silver bordered. But if you're into them, you could put them in your cube. So yeah, just kind of in order. Holiday promos. I think the one that you might see in a cube, and this card is actually pretty messed up, is Gifts Given. It's kind of the opposite of Gifts Ungiven. So just 4 mana. instant search target opponent's library for 4 cards with different names and reveal them. They choose 2 of those cards. You put those cards into their graveyard and the others into your hand. So you get cards from your opponent's deck into your hand with this card. And you get to like see their deck and you just like can pretty confidently and comfortably search for their 4 best cards, or if there's some motivation to do something else. And so it's like 4 copies of Extract, except 2 of the cards go to your hand.
Yeah, it's like when I first read this card, I was like, okay, like my brain is almost conditioned to like see it as a worse gifts ungiven, right? Because usually like drawing from your deck is better than drawing from your opponent's. It's just like generally a good heuristic. But in this case, it's like, it's so, I mean, it's I've had gifts giving cast against me once. It was demoralizing. Because I just knew my, like, the game state did not change, but my probability to win plummeted just because, like, I looked at it and I was like, okay, we're like kind of at parity. I'm a little bit behind, but like the 4 best cards I could possibly draw right now from the situation I'm currently losing, but like not by so much, are gone. And my opponent just went up 2 good cards.
Right.
Right. Because like it's very good. I mean, it's not like, you know, you could, it's not like the same degree of those, you know, conspiracies that are just like mind boggling the best card ever, but it's a good one.
I have good news if you don't want to play against this card. I'm looking at StarCityGames.com. I did not know this before we started recording. SCG has 1 played copy in stock for $350.
Nope.
I did not realize that they were remotely that expensive.
Yeah, I mean, these things, I assume they don't have like some massive print run. Maybe because this is a holiday promo, right? Holiday promos have been going on for however long. This has to be one of the earlier ones. And so
this apparently is from 2007. So
right.
A while.
Years ago. Yeah. Or I guess 14. But yeah, I think that's the only one of the other things about the holiday promos. Most of the time I read them, they like almost, you know, they have some like holiday joke on them that almost doesn't make sense as a Magic card, right? Like it's like they say some statement about like do something with Santa or whatever. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? But this one actually is, you know, I mean, it's not technically a printable Magic card, but
this one has brutal flavor text. Thanks, you shouldn't have. Okay, and so I mentioned that I haven't really read most of the Heroes of the Realm cards. You did share one when we were kind of going over things before the episode. Inzerva, Master of Insights. This card's bonkers, actually.
Yeah, it's real good.
It's a Planeswalker 1, and then it costs 2 more mana symbols, 2 in a blue hybrid and 2 in a red hybrid that Shadowmoor kind of, either 2 generic mana or 1 colored mana. So this card can cost 4 if you only spend red mana, or 4 if you only spend blue mana, or it costs 3 if you have blue and red.
And 5
for a colorless Planeswalker. That's also true. Oh wow, it just gets better every time.
The card. If you put it in most cubes, it's going to be one of the best cards in the cube.
So it starts on 4 loyalty, +2 loyalty, draw 2 cards and discard a card. -2, look at the top 2 cards of each other player's library, put any number of them onto the bottom of that library and the rest on the top in any order, and use Scry 2. So just the same for you. -4, you get an emblem with your opponents, play with their hands revealed, and whenever an opponent draws a card, this emblem deals 1 damage to them. So you can just do that right away when you cast this card. But these loyalty, like +2 loyalty is such a jump that, and also it's draw 2, discard 1. So it's card advantage, and then also a discard outlet. So you're probably going to activate it, but in a pinch, you can just emblem. Like this card is nonsensically powerful. This card is so good.
It's in my opinion, it is, if you were to put it in a cube with, let's say it's the same cube as Oko, it is probably a higher pick than Oko.
I mean, I have like the big is it bias. You'd have to claw this card out of my cold dead hands. I am willing to believe that it's not embarrassing to take it over Oko.
Yeah. But the card's very, very, very good if you're going for like maximum ceiling. And also, I mean, like, I guess if you have a copy or somehow, it's also not, I mean, it's not I would say in terms of like play patterns, it's not the most fun, but it's also not so brutal. Like the -2 is like pretty annoying. I mean, we kind of learned a while ago, right? Like Fate Seal is not a fun mechanic. It's a mechanic that I often find fun, but I tend to find things fun that my opponents really don't.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, the being able to choose, look at your opponent's top of their library, in this case, top 2 cards, right? And decide if they get them. And whenever your opponent does that and they're like, yeah, you can have these, you just know the game's over.
Right. There's another Heroes of the Realm card. It's references Secret Lair was for the people that worked on Secret Lair, some recent Secret Lair product, or maybe just like the full Secret Lair team. I don't really know exactly what that means, but it's a land and you tap it and say the secret word and you make a mana of any color, gain a life, and scry 1. And that's busted too.
Wait, what's the secret word though?
Well, my guess is that when you're given the card, if you're one of the people that were awarded the promo, you were told the secret word.
But then
yeah, so maybe it's no good for me to have the card because I don't know the secret word.
But that, yeah, I mean, that's like, there's also like a mystery. Wait, did you say and scry 1?
I'm pretty sure. I read it earlier today and I forgot to keep a tab open on that. But it's already like really messed up that you make a mana of any color and gain a life.
Yeah.
And scry 1, all of these things are so good on just a land.
Yep. There is like we didn't talk about this, but one of the mystery booster playtest cards, there are a bunch of different actually like lands that they printed, and many of them are just like untapped duels with effectively no downside. And so, there's this card that you just mentioned. There's I think it's called Noxious Bayou, which is the green-black duel that you tap and it gives you a poison counter. So you can basically tap it 9 times.
First 9 are free.
Yeah. And unless you have any proliferate.
Yeah, you gotta watch out for that
going on. And then there's the one that you just talked about. Remind me of Gold Mine, which is an untapped land that taps for a colorless. And you can effectively tap it 5 times for 1 mana of any color.
Oh yeah, like you check a box.
Yeah, there are like 5 boxes.
Nice. Yeah, it's another cool one. That one's evocative of legacy board games. I've actually been playing a lot of Betrayal at the House on the Hill Legacy. So I do love legacy board games. That one's a favorite of mine.
Cool.
Right. So this next category, we're getting into cards. Some of these we've mentioned are expensive. Some of them, the print run is so small, you're never going to get one. So if you're going to play with an Inzerva, odds are there are more copies of this card proxied than the copies that exist.
Yep.
So you're likely proxying those already, but now we're entering the territory where you definitely have to proxy the card because these ones aren't printed. So there already were some cards on Magic Arena that are digital only, that are for Arena only. And they made a recent announcement. They are leaning more into that. We are seeing the advent of the, what's it called? The new Alchemy. Thank you. I'm glad you knew that. Alchemy, which is like a standard adjacent format where you see some cards buffed, some cards nerfed, and additional arena only cards will be introduced there. But we also got a good chunk of arena only cards with Jumpstart Historic Horizons. And there's a number of things going on with this set where there's tracking, stuff that's random, stuff that's in your hand but not revealed that doesn't really work for paper Magic. But some of this stuff you could realistically proxy for your paper cube. There's like a Merfolk where when it enters the battlefield, you can discard an island or a Merfolk and then you conjure a tropical island to your hand. You can definitely do that in paper. And you already have to proxy that Merfolk. You could have a proxy tropical island or a real tropical island, whatever. Like you can make that card work in your cube if you really want to play with it. Another mechanic that you see kind of across a lot of these arena only cards are effects that happen perpetually, which means that they're tracked between zones. Magic generally does not follow a card between zones for any reason. It starts being a different object as it changes zones. There's actually one card I really wish was tweaked a little bit to be a paper card, because I'm really intrigued by energy in Cube. It's just kind of not there on volume. You realistically have to break the singleton rule. But there's a card from Jumpstart Historic Horizons called Long Tusk Stalker. It's a 1 green mana 1/1 cat. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy, and you can pay 2 energy to give it perpetually +1/+0. And you also can choose a creature in your card to give it perpetually +1/+0. So the tracking in your hand is like weird. I kind of wish it was just like a paper card that was this card, except it got +1/+0 counters. Yeah, but whatever. If you want to put that card in your cube, you can proxy it, make it work, whatever. I think that the bigger one that you might see more of is Davriel's Withering, which actually has been nerfed since it was released. So this card, when it first showed up, it was like kind of a combo thing. It's 1 black mana instant. Target creature perpetually gets -1/-2.
Oh, so like Vesperlark?
Yeah, exactly. And they changed it so it can only target your opponent's thing, so you can't just go off with Vesperlark.
That's so funny.
Yeah, if you have like a Blood Artist, you win the game. If you just have the Vesperlark, you draw the game, is how that worked. So that was not great to have. So they had to change that one pretty quickly. That's one thing that's kind of awkward. If you want to use the digital cards in your cube as proxies, is when they change, you kind of have to pay attention. You don't really have to pay attention to that because you're already not playing with a real card, but it might be awkward with your players.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Huh. Yeah, I mean, you'll have it printed out with the text at the time. And I guess that's one of those, there are plenty of house rules, right? Where you figure out what works for you. And some of these arena only cards also don't have any of these mechanics and are actually like really good cards. I came across one today that, it's interesting when I read it. I'm pretty sure this could just be in a normal set. It's called Forsaken Crossroads. It's a land. It enters the battlefield tapped. As it enters the battlefield, choose a color. When it enters the battlefield, scry 1. If you weren't the starting player, you may untap Forsaken Crossroads instead, and it taps add 1 mana of any color.
Oh, sure.
Oh, of the chosen color. Sorry. Of the chosen color. But still, it's basically an Evolving Wilds, right? Like that it enters the battlefield tapped. It'll tap for 1 color of your choice. This scries, and also 50% of the time, it's going to enter untapped too. That's a card that would be in 100% of my non-rarity restricted cubes if it was ever printed in paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also a number of cards they make for arena only. There was like a welcome package kind of thing. I had forgotten about this until just now. You're talking about cards that could be real cards, because there's one that actually some people are really upset hasn't been printed. I know that a lot of Commander players want it. I'm blanking on the name. I'm blanking on what the exact card is. I want to say it's like a 6 mana white creature that makes it so you immediately, like, you draw a card without paying any extra mana, and it can trigger any number of times, as opposed to similar effects. Like when a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. And I think it also makes some tokens, so you like immediately do it. I might be conflating it. Maybe it's like just a smaller creature that just does that. But there's like this white creature that just does work in Paper Magic that's only on Arena that I know that Commander players want. And that would be a reasonable one to proxy for your cube. And then there's some that get harder or easier. I really like reading Davriel's Soul Broker. It's a planeswalker. I'm not going to read the whole card. There's no purpose in it.
Even if you read it, we wouldn't know what it did.
Wouldn't help you. And the line I'm going to read you won't help you either. The line I like reading: -2, accept one of Davriel's offers, then accept one of Davriel's conditions. I don't know what that means. I'm never going to learn what that means. I just like reading that on a Magic card.
Right. Isn't there also like an uncard Urza? It's like a 5-color planeswalker that's like ability is like check this website.
Yeah. You like use a loyalty ability and you go to the website and say which loyalty ability you use, and it generates a random effect.
Yeah.
It's Urza Headmaster because it's his decapitated head. Are there any other arena only cards that you find interesting?
I have to say I probably, I don't know the full breadth of arena only cards.
I super don't either. So no shame in that.
But the one that I wanted to mention was that land, because I came across it today and I was like, that's just a great card. And I was a little surprised by it, because don't we actually, when I first read this card, I was like, is there anything about this that makes it special to be arena only? And
they discussed this card on the preview stream for Alchemy, and I was kind of like half paying attention, and something about like just Magic as a game doesn't track that or something.
But
I don't know.
Don't we have Gemstone?
But
whatever
I think
it is?
It does because of Gemstone. Yeah. So
Gemstone Cavern.
I didn't follow, but I didn't ask any questions for whatever reason. Maybe they just don't want to. That's always an option.
I mean, maybe it could be. Well, I mean, they have to. In order for this card to work, they had to have programmed it into Arena, right?
Yes, definitely. That doesn't necessarily like so. There's non-zero Magic cards that exist that don't really work with the rules. Most of them are older cards.
Can you give me an example?
Well, it was a pretty funny discussion to have around Rhystic Cave, because it's a mana source that your opponent can pay a mana. You tap it, you make a mana of any color unless a player pays one. Mana abilities don't use the stack. So how are they paying the one? You also announce the spell before you pay the costs.
Right.
Like you choose, like, I'm casting the spell. This is my mana source. Oh no, my opponent paid one. What happens now? So the card doesn't really work. It's also not cool or good at all. So its existence is questionable.
Right.
That's probably the best example of that. But anyway, so we're firmly in the territory of cards that you would have to proxy if you wanted it in your cube. And you actually reminded me of something that this kind of came up in a big way a few years back. But there was a Magic set that was designed but never released, never printed. It was kind of a weird thing that happened with the timelines. Early in Magic's history, there were multiple teams working on it, some kind of communication breakdown. But Barry Reich designed a set called Spectral Chaos that was around the time of Legends. It was never released, just kind of showed up and was no longer wanted, basically. If you look at the card file, you can find the card file on it. What happened was a few years back, somebody bought like a collection, not just like of Magic cards, but somebody was selling out of collectibles. And among them was the paper file for Spectral Chaos. And that was kind of the reveal to the world a few years ago, what this card file actually was. And it's really like looking at a selection of Alpha, Arabian Nights, and Legends cards, because some of them are just unplayable garbage and some of them are completely broken. And they're just there on the page next to each other. It's really interesting if you've never looked over this card file. And part of the issue with it was that Legends had the big gold theme. It's when they introduced gold cards. And the Spectral Chaos also had this gold theme. And it just didn't really make sense for them to pick up at the time. But this is something that, I don't know, maybe if you're really interested in old school Magic, but you also kind of find this history intriguing. I don't know. There's certainly people that are interested in the bad stuff. There's certainly people that are interested in the broken stuff. Have you spent much time looking over the file? Are there cards from Spectral Chaos that you like?
I haven't, because I was also made aware of this, this weekend, basically. I don't have much experience with it, but it is kind of in the same vein as, well, these cards technically, they don't really exist, but they are... there's a card file you can go to and you can take cards from them. I don't have any off the top of my head, but I figured also I would expect probably a lot of the listeners to this podcast have never heard of this. And those that are very interested in, the wonky cards for Cube that don't necessarily exist, or uncards, or all of these, may have a lot of fun going through this file.
Yeah. Off the top of my head, I tried to track the file down and look it over, but I didn't really think to do it until it was time to record it. And there's a lot going on
400
with the
cards
set.
too.
Yeah, but I remember that there's a cycle of 0 mana rituals.
Well, that's
Yeah, it's like every color has a 0 mana ritual that makes mana based off of the number of basic lands of a type you control. I think you like choose one of 2 basic lands on all of them, and like those cards are nonsense.
Yeah, I imagine you could have some pretty fun times with those in combo cubes across the board.
Definitely, yeah. You want a combo cube and you want cards that border on real. You can check out Spectral Chaos. And then, of course, I do know that a number of people do like to work on their own custom sets. I have been invited to cube with people who have like their fully custom cubes with cards that they designed. I have declined every invitation of this nature because I think it would be an unfun experience for me and an unuseful one for them if they're trying to test these cards. If I have to read every card in the draft, it's really going to bog things down. Not be fun for me, not be useful for them. If you do something like that, I recommend having a digital card file you can share with everybody before they draft. Maybe your idea is that people do it hands-on. Just keep in mind that that experience is not for everybody.
It's a good point. That makes a lot of sense. I personally have never played with I don't even think I've played a cube that had any custom cards. What's funny is like, I know what, if I were to add custom cards to my cube, they would be like the smallest tweaks to actual existing cards that I want to put in my cube, but I don't think are good enough. It would be like, take Satyr Wayfinder and give it a 2nd point of power.
You actually reminded me of something. I'm glad that you made that point, because I have a friend who for a long time had a Pauper cube with a point system. Huh. If you 3-0'd a draft, you got like 5 points or something like that. And if you ever had 15 points that he tracked in a book, you could, these numbers might be wrong, but you could then change one keyword, modify just one thing about a card in the cube. Some examples. You could make a card worse, but the ones that are exciting are like Muldrifter in this cube had Undying. That one's really busted. The most broken one that was ever in the cube was Lightning Bolt with Storm.
Oh, Jesus.
Lightning Bolts, it was called.
Yeah, Lightning Bolt with Storm sounds like one of the best cards.
If you wanted to grief people, you could just like put Echo on random cards for like cumulative upkeep one.
That's funny.
That's a fun way to do that. And Pauper is a good way to do it too, because you don't care so much about sharpening on the cards and changing them.
Oh yeah, I had before I got my Ravages of War, I sharpied the name Ravages of War over in Armageddon.
Nice. All right, but these are the categories in a number of individual cards we discussed that are intriguing for your cube play in your paper cube that you would not be seeing on the digital offerings, or at least certainly not on Magic Online. We'll probably start to see some of these arena-only cards in the arena cubes in time here. But now we're going to take our final break, and then we'll be counting down our top 8 non-sanctioned cards for paper cube inclusion. What's up, gamers? Taking a break from the pod to talk to you about Star City Games Premium and why, if you're not already a member, you really should become one. First of all, the price is great. Only $7.99 a month. That's less than the price of one collector booster. And for that, you get all the following. You get a 5% discount on all Magic the Gathering sealed product, including the aforementioned collector booster, a 10% discount on all Magic the Gathering singles, if that's more your speed, and as well as a 15% discount on all supplies. It's going to be your deck boxes, your binders, your sleeves. Lord knows I always need more sleeves for cubes and all the Magic cards I have lying around. And you also get free entry into some SCG Tour online events. Definitely check those out. And finally, last but certainly not least, you get exclusive access to Star City Games website content from a stable of some of the game's greatest and most entertaining minds. You know who we are. You know where to find us. Sign up for SCG Premium today at starcitygames.com/join-premium. All right, the time has come to count down our top 8 cards for paper cube inclusion of our non-sanctioned categories of cards. These are not in a specific order. These are just 8 cards we really like. We've mentioned some other cards we really like, but these are the ones that we kind of see the most and people definitely have enjoyed playing in my experience at least. First card in our top 8 is Booster Tutor. This one was originally in Unhinged, reprinted in Unsanctioned. 1 black mana instant. Open a sealed magic booster pack, reveal the cards, and put one of them into your hand. So it's a tutor from a booster pack. Some people do this one differently. It's not uncommon to see either maybe a small cube, a 360 card cube, is just bumped up to 375 so that there's a pack, a quote unquote pack in the leftovers from the cube that you don't draft that you can use for this. Or I really prefer this one costs some money, but when the cube host has packs on hand, you actually crack a booster pack. That's much more fun for me.
Yeah, I've played Booster Tutor quite a few times, and I've seen both of those things. The unfortunate part about it, right, is like most, let's say a standard legal pack that someone's going to have lying around. Generally speaking, the kind of cubes that are going to have Booster Tutor, it's not uncommon to like whiff on cards that you really care about, especially at a high power level. At the same point, right, when you're tutoring from the cube, it's like pretty ridiculous and it's fun and it creates stories. I've certainly had tracking issues with it though when I've done with the cube. So you tutor from the cube and you end up, you play your next game and you draw your card and you're like, oh, this isn't in my deck. I mean, it's not the biggest deal because you can just, effectively cycle it, right? Throw it away, draw a new card. Booster Tutor is a lot of fun. I think I met someone who does it one other. Oh, we're right. There's the one that I actually really enjoyed where it's not tutoring from the cube and you're not cracking a pack, is the person has like sort of like a separate pile for making extra packs that are almost kind of like tailored to it. Whether that's a card like Lore Seeker where you add an extra pack to the draft or something like Booster Tutor. I think I played a cube where, at the beginning they were like, look, if you see a Lore Seeker or you see a Booster Tutor, know that when you use it, 100% of the cards you see are going to be Planeswalkers.
Nice.
And
yeah, that's really cool.
That was pretty cool, right? You could be like, okay, this was like effectively, I get some agency over a random Planeswalker in history to go into my hand.
I like the idea also of having like a curated pack that's all just like not very good versions of effects that you will want, where like it's actually like a silver bullet toolbox, but it's not lightning bolt, it's volcanic hammer.
Sure, it's like the best, you can think of it like the best modal spell of all time. Right.
Yeah.
But like not in terms of like power level. It's just like, cool, you have 15 options. Go.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. You could throw in like, some random is there literally just like enter the battlefield tapped colorless producing land? Right? Like something like
there's a Crumbling Vestige enters tap, makes colorless, and
Sure.
it also makes mana when it enters.
Sure. But yeah, that's actually a really interesting idea. And you can do a bunch of different things with that. I feel like that's sort of the way that I've seen Booster Tutor in which I've enjoyed it the most. I guess
you do Cloud Post with no locusts. Sorry,
Cloud Post with no locusts. There's another one too. There's one that gains life, right? Or that one might enter untapped.
Yeah, Glimmer Post enters untapped.
Yeah. Yeah, I've also seen Booster Tutor with like older packs, which was like a fun moment when it happened. Like everybody gathered around to like crack a really old pack to see if anything crazy was in there. Nothing crazy was in there, but that was like a really fun story. Booster Tutor creates a lot of fun stories, which is one of the reasons why it's probably one of the most popular uncards.
For sure. It's also an uncommon. And it's kind of fun to Booster Tutor in like a peasant cube and hope you get a nice rare.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, next we have one of my personal favorites, Blast from the Past. Blast from the Past is 2 and a red for an instant with Madness for a red, Cycling for 1 and a red, Kicker for 2 and a red, Flashback for 3 and a red, Buyback for 4 and a red. Blast from the Past deals 2 damage to any target. If the spell is kicked, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. So generally when you play this card, the most common play pattern that you're going to end up seeing is it's like an electrolyze variant, right? You're casting it for 1 red, which effectively reads as 1 red, deal 2 damage, draw a card to something. which is pretty good. And it also has flashback, but then won't have to draw the card part of it. It's just like not exactly a Swiss Army knife, right? But it does a lot of things. It's a pretty good rate for those things. And a solid card in your cube that often you can just like do some crazy things with it. Like if you end up with a bunch of mana and you can, end up, cycling and madness and kicker and buyback, and you're just kind of like looping it. It can create some pretty fun stories.
My favorite thing about it, I guess if you don't have double red, you might be in a spot where you have to cast this card just for 2 in a red. But just the fact that madness cycling costs 3, casting it naturally costs 3. So you really should never just be casting it with no modifications.
Yeah, for sure.
Next, we have a conspiracy. It's Emissary's Ploy. So you start the game with this conspiracy face up in the command zone. Before drawing your opening hand, you choose 1, 2, or 3, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast creature spells with mana cost equal to the chosen number. So, talk a lot on the 540 about facilitating aggressive decks, the importance of untapped dual lands on the first turn of the game. This card does a lot of heavy lifting for making a 2 or more aggressive color deck work. You just always get to cast your 1 mana creatures for whatever untapped land you have, which is going to be the most common use. There's definitely going to be uses for 2 and 3, but I think mostly looking at this card is going to be for 1 mana creatures.
Yeah, the most consistent and busted thing that you can do with it, right, is now your mono red deck can also pick up all of the mono white or mono black or any 1-drops in any color and just jam them. And so now rather than like your good mono red decks, end up with 6 to 8 1-drops if you have enough of them in your cube. Now you end up with like a mono red deck that ends up with 12, 13 1-drops, and you're just always going turn 1, 1-drop, turn 2, double 1-drop. And that's very, very powerful. One of the things that I like about this card is that it makes you think differently about the decisions. And I've certainly used it in a cube in like a birthing pod deck once, actually, I believe. I used this on 3. And that actually helped me a lot, because one of the more difficult parts of birthing pod in cube is often you end up to have a really nice chain. You're stretching your mana. And there are often a lot of like double pipped cards that you would really like to play that can be more difficult. In this particular example, my base was red-green. And it was, a Kiki pod deck. So I could cast the Kiki, and that was kind of fine. But this let me also have the Deceivers and the Pestermites castable, as well as able to pod chain and other things. So it's cool that it like lets you dynamically during the draft change your plan and think differently about what you're going to effectively name. But for the most part, yeah, it's going to be a facilitator of this 2 to 3 color type aggro deck. Generally, and I was mentioning this to Ryan beforehand, the conspiracies that I like are ones that kind of just slightly modify how you think and how you draft. I really like Emissary's Ploy. I also like Unexpected Potential, which is effectively this for any 1 card. I can name 1 card on Unexpected Potential, and that card I can cast for any mana. There's also World Knit, right, which basically says everything you can cast for any mana, although in that case you are required to play everything else in your pool. Our next card is probably a favorite between the both of us, and it does exactly what it says. It says the card is called How to Keep an Izzet Mage Busy. It's 1 mana. It costs a blue-red hybrid. It's a sorcery, and it says return card name to its owner's hand, meaning how to keep an Izzet Mage busy, because this is a playtest card. Effectively, trigger prowess as much as you want, build your storm count, whatever the Izzet Mage is doing, they're going to be busy with this one.
2 cards. There's probably more cards depending how deep you want to go, but the easy ones, if you have 3 mana going into it or already have a couple counters on your runaway Steamkin, this is Infinite Storm, Infinite Prowess. Same with Burgi, God of Storytelling. just keep making your red mana and casting it again. That'll keep you busy.
Yeah, really forever though.
And so, you write very high powered cubes. You can do the storm thing. And then it is also just like a nice, goofy spells matter cards for your young pyromancer and just assorted things of that nature.
Also, the art is lovely.
Yeah, I really like. There's like flavor text in the art. It says, "Can we make it arcane?" Love that. Next is another playtest card. It's Impatient Iguana. 1 and a red for a 2/1 with haste, a lizard wizard. And if Impatient Iguana is in your opening hand and you're not the starting player, you may reveal it. If you do, you become the starting player. So it's not fully a conspiracy. It's a ley line of go first. I affectionately refer to this card as Shotgun Lizard. Just if you are not on the play, reveal it from your hand, call Shotgun, and start taking game actions. Just a nice tool for red aggressive decks. 2/1 haste. It's not quite clearing the line. As it's the best red creatures are now better than that, which is great for red. And this is a fun card, but you do have to have an aggressive slant. And it's nice that it's like powerful but not busted.
Yeah, I like Impatient Iguana. There's quite a few playtest cards that are kind of like that. That are like good for red, kind of good for cube. They do some interesting things. I think the other one would be like Lazier Goblin, which is like a sorcery speed shock that can randomly become a creature later. I am a big fan of, if I'm adding cards like this, cards that change the game a little bit. And Impatient Iguana is kind of exactly that. It does this thing that you're not supposed to be able to do, changing who goes first. And it's on like a card that you could be happy to put in your deck if you're a red aggressive deck, which is nice.
For sure.
All right. So next we have Who, What, When, Where, Why, which is going to take a while for me to read because I have to now read 5 cards. It's a split card. The first card is Who, which is X and a white for an instant. It says target player gains X life. Then there's so tiny. What? which is an instant for 2 and a red. It's destroy target artifact. When, which is 2 and a blue for an instant, counter target creature spell. Where, 3 and a black for an instant, destroy target land. Or why, 1 and a green for an instant, destroy target enchantment. So another kind of like Swiss Army knife type card. All of them are bad, but if you have access to 5 colors, at some point you'll probably find a use for something. It's also, I feel like this is one of those cards that has a really big nostalgia factor in the sense, like, I know when I made my first cube, I had this card in it 10 years ago or however long that was. And I've certainly, like, when I started playing cubes again, I feel like this was in quite a few cubes. I feel like it's been pushed out even in the uncubes lately, but it's kind of fun. You can always tell during the draft if anybody's reading it.
That's the point I was going to make, is half the fun is somebody who doesn't know what it is trying to read it with a tiny sideways who and what. Not the most efficient answer, but a nice little toolbox there. Very, very fun card, if not the most powerful anymore, as Ryan pointed out. All right, so next is our card that has been previewed from Unfinity, Killer Cosplay. Green for an equipment with equip 3. And whenever Killer Cosplay becomes attached to a creature, you choose a creature card name with an identical mana cost. That creature becomes a copy with the chosen name until Killer Cosplay becomes unattached from it. So you're playing mental magic with your creatures. You equip for 3, and then just whatever your exact cost is, you change your creature to something like that. So if you have a Bomat Courier, a 1 mana artifact creature, just 1 color, 1 generic mana, you equip it. Now you have a Phyrexian Dreadnought.
Get him.
It's a super fun card. All kinds of stuff you can do that. Do you play much mental magic, Ryan?
I haven't in a very long time, but I'd play like randomly at like the side of a GP with a stack of cards.
Okay.
But not
very
so
bad
much.
at it.
You're very bad at it.
I'm incredibly bad. I'm embarrassingly bad at it. I think that actually most Magic players are very bad at it. And many might think that they're good because they've never played against somebody who's actually good at it. Because there's just like so much you can do. Just you almost have to ban graveyards to have a reasonable game, or like ban dredge and just a number of other graveyard things. There's all kinds of wacky stuff that happens in Mental Magic. Killer Cosplay is not going that deep. It's just saying, hey, you want a different creature that's better for this situation? Well, if you can name it, you got it.
Right, yeah, because I imagine with Mental Magic, this is something I never even thought of, right? Like after you cast the card, it's still like if I play a 5 mana, like it costs 4 and a green for some creature or whatever, and that goes to my graveyard, it can then be a Golgari Grave Troll?
Yep.
Or, okay, yeah, it sounds like if you know all of the ins and outs, I'm going to go back to what I said before. I'm very bad at it. But yeah, I'm actually really excited about Killer Cosplay. It's one of the first, this has the Acorn stamp. So one of the first, like, not tournament legal, not real cards that's like very close to enticing me to end up actually putting it as a game piece in my cube. The reason being is there are so many cards, you only have so many slots, right? And there's so many cards that I want to play with. And while this isn't necessarily rational, like the fact that technically I could play with them in my cube because this card is in my cube makes me all giddy.
This card is a mortal lock for my artifact, Tubert. Just the exact example. I'm going to be turning things into Phyrexian Dreadnought.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like a best across the like different costs. Phyrexian Dreadnought is the like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But there are so many, I mean, like Mental Magic, there's just actually an endless possibility of things that you can do with this card.
Right. All right, so this list was in no particular order, but I'm going to go ahead and say number 1 is number 1. What do we have, Ryan?
All right, we have Cogwork Librarian. Cogwork Librarian, this doesn't matter. It's an artifact. It costs 4 mana. It's a construct creature, and it's a 3/3, and none of that matters at all. When you draft Cogwork Librarian face up. As you draft a card, you may draft an additional card from that booster pack. If you do, put Cogwork Librarian into that booster pack. So basically, you get to like sandbag a pick for later. You look at your pack, you go, okay, like I could take this for my deck, but I could also take this Cogwork Librarian. Because I love it, usually I just take the Cogwork Librarian. And then at some point later in the draft, you can put the Cogwork Librarian back into the pack to be able to take a second card out of that pack. I adore this card. It currently isn't in my cube, but I'll probably add it back in. It's the one card that from like all of these sets that I just love. I don't mind the ones that like change drafting as much as I do, because like when you're playing the games and you play against one, I feel like that's where like the feeling for me comes from. Whereas like an example is Paleano Vanguard is a conspiracy card. It's a 2 mana 2/2 that you draft it face up, and you can reveal a card that you draft that's a creature, and you note its creature types, and Paleano Vanguard is a lord for those creature types. Like that's another example of a card that I've played with in my cube, because to me, yeah, it does some weird things to the draft, but like a 2 mana 2/2 that's a lord, often for humans, is just like a magic card. Cogwork Librarian, it's just seeing this thing jump around the table is pleasant, and it also lets you do some great things. It's super powerful too, because you just take it early, and then when you know what you want, you get double that, right? Mm-hmm. So I adore this card. I think it's definitely number 1, and agree. The order of the others, I think, are kind of up for grabs, but this one's number 1 for sure.
Love seeing Cogwork Librarian in a cube. I also have a house rule. This is my Cogwork Librarian backstory. So we were drafting Spooky Cube 6 years ago, I think. Outrageous amount of time. Weird to think about. Anyway, at the time, so the cube still to this day, it now exists in a somewhat different form, but very synergy driven, very important to link up cards that play well together, not just taking the most powerful card out of a given pack. You're really trying to build an engine, build a deck. And at the time, the cube contained Wild Mongrel, Basking Ruala, and Vengevine. And I just wanted to see that happen at least once and then evaluate how reasonable it felt to have these cards around from there. But we're doing a draft. I have Basking Ruala in my pool. Pack 3, I open up Wild Mongrel and Vengevine. Just like, take one, fail to wield the other. And I was just like beside myself mad about it. And the next time we drafted, I just showed up with 8 Cogwork Librarians. And I was like, okay, we're going to try this thing. If everyone thinks this is cool, I want to try this thing where we just start the draft. Everybody has a Cogwork Librarian in their pool. And whenever you want to use it, you can use it. And then they just go around. There's extra cards in the draft. And that went over super well. It's actually really fun to draft that way. And kind of when you do it the first time, some people are like kind of sheepish about using the librarian. The maximum fun is actually using them early and often. You want to keep having them go around. That's actually how you get the best mileage out of them. But it's actually really fun to just do the draft that way. Being able to double dip, this can really get you going on forcing a deck with your pack 1, pick 1 / pick 2. Or it is just nice when that pack rolls around where it's like pick 7 and your archetype is open, except like some of the earlier packs were dry and all the gas is in this pack. And so you actually get to take 2 cards out of it. So I love Cogwork Librarian.
So I have a quick question, though. So when you did that, everybody gets a Cogwork Librarian. When people put them back in, you could draft the Cogwork Librarian again, right? So it could keep bouncing around and go around.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the part that I think is so fun. There was a time when I initially had this. I did a draft where basically a friend of mine, his name's Andrew, loves Cogwork Librarian. I love Cogwork Librarian. And I guess the other people at the table just like either they didn't like the card, didn't read it as much, thought it was weird, whatever it was. We just kept on passing it basically between each other. Like it would basically anytime he would put it in the pack. So I took it at the beginning, and then like in pack 1, I also then wanted to take 2 cards. So I put it back. Then he picked it up. And then in pack 2, which is going the other direction, like he uses it, and then I pick it up. And then in pack 3, I have a fond memory of that. Have you ever done the everybody gets a Cogwork Librarian since then?
Yeah, we did it pretty much every time we drafted Spooky Cube for a while. I have 8 foils now.
Wow.
I don't use it for like very powerful cube environments. I think it's like actually kind of brutal to do that in a powered cube. Like if you open up 2 pieces of power, like that's so busted.
Oh yeah, you get them.
But like for a medium power, high synergy cube, I like that house rule a lot.
Yeah. And house rules, I mean, it's just Cogwork Librarian's a lot of fun, but just generally, I think it's a good thing to say. Like it's your cube and your experience. And if you want to modify it in a way that like makes it more fun for you or you think is interesting, that's a great thing to do. Like even if the card Cogwork Librarian didn't exist, even just saying like, hey, everybody gets this token here, and we all understand that, you know, if you put your token in the middle, you're allowed to take 2 cards out of the pack. Is something that you could do, and you know, maybe like again for like a low power synergy cube, that's actually really fun and lets you do some really cool things.
Something that my friends have started doing actually with the Cogwork Librarian house rule, because they know it makes me mad, is they'll ask if they can play the Cogwork Librarian. Like I'm old enough that I have played some hill giants with no text in my retail limited decks. Like that's a thing I've done. It's part of my history. But if you're asking me, like if you're telling me that you want to play a 4-mana 3/3 with no text in my cube, that's offensive. That's not cool. Don't be like that.
That's funny.
You gotta have something better.
I can imagine, like, okay, let's say, is it plausible to have a good deck in the Spooky Cube, but where you really, like, you're so good at just binning things to the graveyard that having an artifact creature in your deck is, like, generally so positive that, like, it doesn't matter if this was a 10-mana 1/1?
If you're like full in on Madness and you have some stuff that cares about Delirium, you could like in theory want to put this card in your deck, but I assure you that's not what's happening with my friends.
They're just pulling you.
Exactly. To the extent that that deck theoretically exists, it never has literally.
Right.
Anyway, this has been our discussion on non-sanctioned style cards for Cube, stuff that we like, some ideas for you for your own paper cube. Is there anything that we didn't discuss that you would like to add at this time, Ryan?
I don't think so. Actually, there's one other card that I do want to mention that I don't think we mentioned, but I think is just fun. And I didn't know it existed until I was, preparing for this podcast. And I'm sure plenty of listeners don't know exists. So I'll bring that one card up. It's Zim Mesmeric Lord, which is, I believe it's 1 blue, black for a 3/4 flying death touch. When it enters the battlefield, an opponent orders their hand, right? And then basically they reveal cards from left to right. And at any point you can tell them to stop and they discard the card that they stop at. So it's almost like a good rate creature, right? 3/4 flying death touch for 4 mana is like solid rate, although its casting cost is a bit hard. That, enters the battlefield and thought seizes, which is just a good card. But also, like, I can imagine that mini game being extremely enjoyable to play. Like, either being the person trying to figure out whether or not it's good to stop and make them discard that card, or the person that, like, has to order their hand to try and figure out, okay, like, maybe I should put how do I do it so I can put my worst card last to make them discard my worst card, but entice them to believe that they go all the way to the end? Do I put my best card first? How do you do that? I just think that that's such a fun puzzle. And so many of, cards from mystery boosters, promotional cards, unsets, give you those puzzles. Those are like my favorite things about these sets. And that's a card that I think that made me happy when I saw it existed this week.
Yeah, that's a super cool design. Really fun way to do targeted discard. I actually would have loved it if they just printed that exact texture of discard effect on just a 1 mana sorcery.
Yeah.
That would have been like right into powered cube for me. But even as 4 mana, it is still very cool.
I'd play the crap out of that other card.
All right, so that is going to do it. I am Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter, as well as my articles weekly on StarCityGames.com about all things Cube. Where can we find you, Ryan?
Y'all can find me at RC Saxe on Twitter, or every Tuesday and Thursday at StarCityGames.com, writing about the most recent limited environment.
And I've actually been slacking on the outro for a couple weeks, but this is your reminder to like and subscribe to the 540 wherever you're listening to us, be it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, any podcast app you like. Leave us a review. We'd really appreciate that. Comment, feed the algorithm, keep us going, spread the love. If you have a critique, you can offer that too. But really, I would prefer the likes, the shares, and all that good stuff. But thank you so much for listening this week, and we'll see you in a week.